This is Unfuck the Poor, and we're just going to jump right back into my interview with my sister Jessi. This is part 2, and we're going to rewind about 6 or 7 minutes so that you can get all caught back up on what's going on in this episode. We have just established that George Oscar is a terrible person, or is at least he's not a good father. And I never really considered him much of a father, and he is indeed an asshole. And I know that much about him at this point in mine and your relationship. But a few years ago, how long ago has this been now? When did you call me?
7 years.
7 years. 7 years ago, you called me, and I was in the middle of tiling my upstairs shower. And after we got off the phone, I proceeded to get really drunk and finish tiling that shower. And then when I woke up the next day, I realized that I had to tear all the tile out and redo it because I was so drunk when I tiled it. So what did you call me about 7 years ago?
I called you, and I want you to know I was terrified to tell you guys. The reason I didn't want to tell you guys, I didn't think you would judge me or not support me. I just knew it would fuck you guys up, and I didn't want that to happen, especially Daniel with him being a police officer. That was really, really scary for me. But what I called to tell you was that I was pressing charges against your father for sexually abusing me as a child. I had already gone to the police at that point, and it was moving forward because when I went to the police, part of me didn't believe that they would believe me because he had beaten it into our heads that nobody would believe us, that he was an upstanding pillar of the community and they would take his word over ours. And we believed that because he was a paramedic, he knew cops, he knew, like, he was a member of the community that was, connected. And it scared us to tell anyone. But I went up to, okay, this all started, hold on, I'm gonna backtrack to when I was 19. I had just had my son. He was 8 months old, and I came up to for Christmas because I wanted to see you and Daniel and David. That was like, and I know you guys would be there at Christmas. So I wanted to come up for Christmas, and I got there the day before y'all were supposed to have your Christmas dinner. And I ended up telling my mother, we ended up getting into an argument. First of all, I went into that house and it was fucking disgusting. And he yelled at me for trying to clean it. But I was like, I can't let my son out of his car seat to crawl on your nasty ass floor because there's cat litter and cat shit and cat piss everywhere. Like, fuck off. I'm going to clean for my kid's sake. But sorry, that was off topic. But I ended up getting into a fight with my mother, and she was pissed that I went to live with my dad because I couldn't take it in that house anymore. And Pete had already kicked me out twice. And so I called my dad the first time it happened, and his girlfriend wouldn't let me move in. And then the second time I was like, I literally cannot work this out. I cannot stay here. I will be homeless. And he's like, well, fuck this bitch. I'll sell my motorcycle. We'll get a place. It's cool. Come on down. But I went and I was living with my dad. And my mother was already mad at me because she wasn't as involved in my son's life as she wanted to be. She wanted to be there for his birth, and I would not let her. And so when we were arguing, she accused my father of molesting me. And something inside of me just kind of snapped. And I said, no, it wasn't my dad. It was your husband. And essentially she called me a whore at the end. Well, she denied it at first, and then she called me a whore and told me I deserved everything he ever did to me. And that was about the last of my relationship with my mother. I tried to keep a relationship with her for the sake of Jonathan and Laura, but I couldn't do it. But that's neither here nor there. But I remember I was so scared of Pete coming home and her saying what I said, telling him what I said, and him doing something to like seriously fuck me or my son up. I ended up going to a friend of mine's house, and I called my dad, and he had told me when I was going up there, he said, don't call me. I don't have the money or to put in the gas tank to come get you from Murfreesboro. But I ended up calling him, and he ended up coming. And he's like, I need to know why you're leaving right now, why you couldn't get a ride back, what's going on. And I refused to tell him until we were halfway back, and I knew he didn't have the money or the gas to go back and kill Pete. And I told him, I was like, my mom accused you of molesting me. And I told her it wasn't you, it was her husband. And my dad got real, real quiet. And I could see, like I could physically see on his face, his heart was like shattering. And I could see the rage and the want to kill somebody, you know. And he was good. He was for the most part, but he really wanted me to press charges, and I couldn't do it. I was too scared. I wasn't in a place that I could do that. And it's hard to say that because you want to be like, you know, if this happens, tell someone immediately, stand up for yourself. But I also understand having to work through your own shit before you do it. But
because that's one of those things, like if mental health is such a serious issue, because you cannot deal with anything more complicated than what's right in front of you. And the entire prospect of pressing charges, I feel like would not have been possible if you hadn't gone and gone to therapy first. And I think that was really smart on your part to recognize that.
yeah, it was because it's not easy. It wasn't easy for me to talk about this to a complete stranger, which is what I had to do in therapy. And um, I think if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to give my statement to the police, because when you're given a statement to the police, you have to go into detail. You have to describe every little thing that you can remember. And if I hadn't like already gone in through and gotten it out in the open at least once, because once you talk about it once, it gets easier to talk about each time. Like now I can freely tell my story, and my voice is a little shaky and I get a little anxious and I'm a little tightly wound during it, but I can get through it and it won't negatively affect me. I'll feel better afterwards. But I got to a point where I realized even with therapy, I was stuck. I wouldn't be able to move forward until I did press charges. So I had my dad drive me up to Murfreesboro. I didn't have a car then. That's why he drove me everywhere. But I went to the police station and I told him like a brief summary of what I was doing there, and they had me write it all down. And 3 pages later of just the general gist of things, took 3 pages because it was over a decade of abuse. It was hard to write it all out. And then I got a phone call from a detective, and she came down to Chattanooga and talked to me at home, at my house. She met me at my house, and she was amazing. She really was. She didn't make me feel like it was my fault at all. She's like, no, he groomed you. It's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. It's normal to feel like that. This is a textbook case. And I ended up telling her everything. It started shortly after he moved in with my mother.
You were young then.
I think I was 4 when it started. And it wasn't like super sexual stuff. It was like he would like rub my back or my body or something, or you know, lay in bed and hold me or something, and it made me uncomfortable. But it wasn't like, I guess, technically crossing a line. I want to say it was, because it made me uncomfortable and it was crossing my boundary, but it was inappropriate, seeing as how he was not my father. He was just the man my mom married. You know, it was completely, he should not have been in my bedroom at all. That's a pro tip for all you listeners. If you get married, that step parent should not be in your child's bedroom at night at all, ever. Don't care what they're saying, unless there's a fire and they're trying to save their life. Because anything they need to say to them, they can say in the daylight in any other fucking room with anybody else around them. It's no. But anyways, but it got progressively worse. Laura says, hey. She had it like 3 Y's, so I had to say it like that.
How is she doing?
She's been married. She's divorced. Her ex lives in Texas. She's got a 10-year-old son. No, after her divorce, she moved up here. She moved in with our dad about 6 years ago.
So y'all are all back in Chattanooga now?
Yes, we are. Funny enough, after our press charges, I'm skipping ahead, my mother decided she needed to be where her children were and fucking moved down to Chattanooga. She somehow, I want y'all to understand how much of a master manipulator my mother is, okay? Because my father has despised this woman for over 2 decades. And then she somehow managed to move in with him and start dating him again, which scared the ever-loving shit out of me. Laura and Jonathan were all for it, but I was like, no, that bitch is crazy. Run, daddy, run.
That is so strange to me, because growing up, the stories that she and my father told me about him were that he was like
a monster.
Like he was a pervert. He was a monster. He was like a drug addict and all this shit. Like that's what we grew up knowing about your father.
That's sadly what I grew up knowing about my father too, because we stopped going up there pretty much when I was like 12, I think, I stopped seeing him for visitation. And the reason was soccer, according to my mom. But they had already been planting the thought of my dad's a terrible person kind of thing in my head. So I wasn't really torn up. I guess I was kind of like you, like, okay, whatever.
So, this is a good thing.
Yeah, and it was hard for me. That's how bad it was in that household. I literally called a man I did not know who I thought was not a good person and asked to live with him to get out of that situation. And thankfully, of course, I was old enough to kind of realize that he probably wasn't the way that the bad people said he was. But it was hard for me to do that. But I'm glad I did because he was great. He saved my life. I would not have lived. I would not have survived. I would have killed myself if I had nowhere to go. I truly believe that. And Daniel saved me by letting me stay with him for a month or two that summer before I moved down there. I was not a good roommate. I need to apologize to him about that. I didn't get a chance to do that last time I saw him, but I was not a good roommate. I can admit to that. But it's just because y'all, I think they told y'all that I was bipolar and like refused to take my medicine or something.
Yep.
Not true. Not bipolar. Okay. I just have depression and
Same.
was raised in an abusive household.
Same.
It's not bipolarness, but it was, you'll probably believed it because I acted like a crazy person. I didn't know how to cope with shit that was going on.
So I remember that Christmas because looking back on it now, I can see that they were both like spinning this narrative that Jessica had come down and she wasn't on her meds, and they insinuated that you were being unsafe with your baby. Yeah.
They fucking did what?
Yeah. I'm
sorry.
No, I'm
don't put that in your podcast. That's not. Maybe don't say.
This is all a dramatization.
I'm a mama bear, and it infuriates me that they would try to make y'all think that I was an unfit mother. Because in my mind, it makes me think that they would go and tell authorities I was an unfit mother, and then they would try to take custody of my son, and that infuriates me. It makes me want to beat the ever loving hell out of him.
But keep in mind, we were adults then.
That's where my mind goes. I'm sorry.
No. But we were adults then, and so at this point, like, I no longer like bought into any of this bullshit, and I was like, oh, well, what happened? What did she say? What did she do? And they could not explain it. Like, none of it. It didn't make sense. And I was like, why were you arguing? Was there what happened? And it was like just spinning wheels. And oh yeah, sorry, it's been a while, so I'm like having to dig deep here. I'm digging deep here.
12 years, you're good.
No, I remember she was talking about how the baby needed to be changed, or something like that. But like you were saying, the house is too dirty, so you wouldn't change the baby. And then Pete was like, I told her that, we had cleaned something well, and she just started going off. And then Carla was like, she's supposed to be on her medicine. And they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, none of this really makes any sense what you're saying. I was like, your house is filthy. There is nowhere to clean a baby here. I was like, I was like, if that was her issue.
You know what I did? I brought the fucking pack and play. Yeah. I changed him in that.
I'm thinking like this place is not even suitable for like adults to be in. And for reference, kitty litter everywhere, and their trash can. This sticks out. The trash can was against the refrigerator, and they had just been like tossing food at the trash can, and the entire side of that fridge was just like black with gunk.
There was cat shit on the wall in my old bedroom there was not a bed in there, and that's where they wanted me and my son to sleep, by the way.
So I do remember that, but I remember their excuses, and their story made no sense.
But I'm a bad mom.
Yeah. Sorry. So continue. Which, by the way, you've talked to the detective, who was awesome, by the way.
Yes, Detective Patty. She was fantastic. I don't think she works in that department anymore. I think she's like head of the SROs now, but that's cool. She was really awesome. She sat with me for 3 hours while I went over everything I could remember. And the thing about that is I blocked a lot out. When I have flashbacks I remember them, or if I have a nightmare, it's like my memory's coming back. But I blocked so much of it out because it was the same shit every day. And it's too much for anybody really to take. And if I remembered every minute of it, I would kill myself. Probably. I learned early on to start blocking things out. And my memory sucks because of it, and I hate that. But she was there with me through 3 hours of everything I could remember. And she recorded on her phone so I didn't have to write it down. And then she said, at this point, the statute of limitations has come into effect on, or has run out on anything that happened, excuse me, before you were 9. So those first 5 years of abuse, he does not have any punishment for. It's like it never existed, which pisses me off. Any of you lawmakers listening, fucking change that shit. Crimes against children should not have a statute of limitations. Nobody fucking changes. They're not going to change in 10, 15 years if they're hurting children. They're fucking monsters. But that was my side note there. Sorry.
I'm especially considering, like in your case, that those 5 years, that those are crimes against a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old. Like,
Yeah. The sad thing is by the time I was 7, I'm not going to go into super like gross details, but he was using his genitalia on me. And my mother walked in when I was 7 years old on him doing that. And legally it was rape. And she asked him what he was doing. And he said, I'm helping her with her nightgown. And clearly he was raping me. And she told him to hurry up and finish and come to bed, and then just walked away. While her husband was naked, her 7-year-old daughter was naked in bed together. And she just said, hurry up and finish and come to bed. And that's why I don't have a relationship with my mother anymore. Because I believe a mother's job is to love and protect her children, and she fucking failed on both counts. And I believe she knew about all of the abuse. She couldn't have not known. He did it to me when I would go, if I had a bad dream, I'd go and I'd try to get into bed and like sleep next to my mother, thinking I'd be safe because my mother's right there. Nope. He would touch me in the bed next to her. He would, when you guys would come over, I don't know if you knew this, David does, but I don't know if you did, but he would have me or Laura sit on his lap and he'd cover us with that blanket. He would undo our pants and touch us
I
with you guys right there.
yeah, he had that fucking recliner with the blanket on it, and yeah, I mean, it was like fucking
That's why I would
clockwork.
rather sit on the nasty ass floor.
Yeah, I you did tell me that before. I didn't realize it was. I mean, it makes sense that it was both you and Laura, but for some reason I was thinking it was only you. I didn't realize it was both of you.
No, it was both of us, and that's something we never talked about. We there was a wall that he built between us so that we wouldn't discuss it. And Detective Patty told us that's textbook for our situation. So, and we're slowly repairing our relationship. I think her and I are in a good place now. But growing up, we were enemies because of him, and it's because he was abusing us both. But he did start with me, and it was a few years of just me before it was her as well. And I suspected that he abused her, but I didn't have any confirmation until I pressed charges. And I told the detective that she might also be a victim. And I gave her her number so that she could call her. And I told Laura, but I didn't tell Laura before I pressed charges because I was worried she would still call him Daddy Pete and she'd still talk about mom. And at that point, I had completely cut my mother off. Had completely cut both of them off. So I was worried she was going to like warn him or something. So, and I feel terrible about that because I should have trusted her more than that. But at the time, I was so worried that nobody was going to believe me and he was going to get away with it. So I ended up calling her before the detective, and she was like, okay, yeah, I wish I had a heads up, but all right. And she gave her statement, and we've still never really talked about it. But she did give her statement to the detective, and she talked to the DA as well, but hers was all over the phone. And at the end of the day, she said, this is a he said, she said case because it'd been so long since I'd been in that house. There was no physical evidence. The bed that I used, like I said, it was gone probably the day I left. And So what she wanted to do was a controlled meeting where I would like meet him at a coffee shop and try to get him to confess. And I was scared. So I talked to my therapist about it and he said, why don't you guys just do a phone call instead? And so that's what we ended up doing. She gave me a recorder to like record the phone call. And she warned me that he was not going to accept fault. He was going to blame me. And he did. He accused me of being the instigator. I was 4 years old, mind you, when this started. 4 fucking years. I didn't know what any of this shit was. How was I the instigator? I'm still pissed about that. But
this is probably one of the most disgusting things that I've heard one human tell another human. Was this recording that you shared with me, but I'll let you continue.
Yeah. I had actually come up to Murfreesboro for that to get the recorder and stuff. And I remember, I think we were over at Daniel's house because I tried to call before and he didn't answer. I think he was like in a class or something. I don't fucking know. But he didn't answer. So when he called back, I was over at Daniel's house and David sat next to me while I talked to him. And I have never seen David so enraged. He was shaking like this. His whole body was shaking like this. And that phone call, I think, was 7 minutes long. And I started it out by saying, I'm in therapy and, I've got a lot to think about. And I want to, talk about what happened. And he basically made it out to be when he had back surgery, he was so incapacitated because of the surgery and the pain medications that he couldn't stop me from climbing on top of him. And I had to sit there and be like, oh, I'm so sorry I did that. And just to get him to admit that it happened, because it doesn't matter, like, I didn't instigate it, but if I had, I was still a minor and he was not. So it would have been him at fault. He legally would be at fault. So that was what the detective told me. I had to get him to talk about it and I couldn't stomach it for more than 7 minutes. And I ended up like tumbling out of my car and like dry heaving because I was so sick to my stomach. And David was shaking in rage. And I gave the recording to the detective and I thought that was the end of it. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's a really important aspect of dealing with a narcissist is you can't confront them in terms of reality. You have to meet their reality no matter how distorted or twisted or wrong it is. And the fact that you were even able to stomach this version of reality for any length of time is remarkable. Like to sit there and apologize for being assaulted, raped as a child. There are no fucking words because that is beyond the pale of what one human should be expected to do. But you did it. So sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're fine. And I appreciate that because I didn't actually, I think you kind of just made me realize that by saying it, it is ridiculous to have to do that, but you're right. You got to play into their delusion in order to get them to even talk about it. But I gave the recording to the detective and she took it to the DA and he said they couldn't press charges yet because there wasn't a timeline. And with the statute of limitations, if I didn't get a timeline, he could say it just occurred back when I was too young, like for the statute of limitations had already run out or whatever. So I had to talk to him a second time. And that time, the detective and another detective came to my house in Chattanooga and were with me the whole time. And that call was almost an hour long. And I got to about 35, 40 minutes into it of just playing into his delusion of it was my fault. He's not a monster, I am, kind of thing. And I kind of snapped.
I do remember this.
I snapped and I went off on him. And I don't know what it was. I think it scared the shit out of him because he was just like, I did do that. I did do that. I was like, you were the one that started. He's like, yes, I was. And he admitted to everything. And I got him to admit to doing it to my sister.
So the second recording, I didn't realize it was an hour, but about 30 or 40 minutes into it, I do remember you snapped on him, and you're fed up. You're listening to him, and you're fed up. You fed into his bullshit long enough, and you just confront him like straight on. Why do you think he responded the way that he did? Why do you think he just straight up admitted it when you did that?
Probably because he was still under the impression I was using this to work on things in therapy. And I told him, I was like, fucking be honest, or I'll fucking call the cops right now and press charges. So I did threaten him with that. And the DA ended up saying that they couldn't use like the majority of that recording because I did threaten them, but everything they used before that. But I did threaten to call the cops on him right then. And so he did admit to everything. But then the detective who was right there and heard everything, like at the end of it, I threw my phone and I just started crying. And bless my dad's heart, he was trying to stay in his room and stay out of it so that I didn't have to deal with him listening to all of the stuff while I was, I didn't have to think about that. But I know he heard because he came running out as soon as it was over and was hugging me and telling me it's okay. And he was proud of me, which I needed. And it was so hard to do that, but I was so done with his shit. And at the end of it, after I went off and I got him and the phone call was over, I felt relieved, but I was kind of in disbelief because at that point I was like, that's everything they need. This is actually happening. And I don't know if I called you before or after that, but I do remember, I think I called you guys before that, but I remember when they decided to pick him up for questioning, he denied everything and made it out to be my fault, and he was the victim. And then they brought my mother in for questioning, and she denied knowing anything, which was bullshit, but whatever. And then the DA called me and we talked, and something I don't like about Rutherford County is that they automatically, right out of the gate, offer a deal.
Yep.
Because he had 300 and I want to say like 34 charges.
Holy shit. I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was well over 300 charges. I don't remember the exact number, but that sounds right. So if he had gone to trial and been found guilty on all of those charges, it would have been like multiple life sentences. So they ended up offering him a deal of 20 years. And he didn't take it until I pressed charges I started the process in the middle of January, and he wasn't sentenced until November 7th that same year.
He sat on the deal that long?
Yeah.
He was just in prison that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was. And honestly, I know he wasn't having a good time either because like you described how he looked before, big belly and everything. Well, when he was sentenced, I went to court that day and he looked so bad. Like he was just a shell of a person. Like, the hospital bands they put on your wrist when you go to the hospital?
Yep.
Like those little bands. His was on his upper arm. That's how skinny he was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it made me so happy. I'm not going to lie. I felt a little warm and fuzzy inside because that was another thing they did. They starved me. They would feed me a portion fit for a 2-year-old and then deny me food when I was hungry. So if I didn't eat that 2-year-old portion, I didn't eat. They never sent me to school with lunch money or with sack lunches, nothing. In high school, I started taking culinary arts just so I could eat during the day.
And you know how that was framed to us was that you are such a picky eater that you hardly eat anything. I remember this distinctly.
Oh, yeah.
And okay, so 300 something charges is a fucking lot. Multiple life sentences is what he deserves. He got 20. And I may have made some phone calls that I shouldn't have, but I got like a more detailed list of charges against him. That's not like it's public record, but like I had to call to get. You can look it up online, but I got like a more detailed list. And that was part of like me writing everything out and like putting everything together in one place and just reading through the entire list. It's a lot of charges that he got charged with, that he got 20 years for. I did not realize there was enough information or enough evidence for 300 something charges. How did they count the charges? How did they count up over 300?
I think what they did was they broke down each level of abuse, like how he started was each time that was one charge. And the fact that it was so often, because it was an almost daily basis, sometimes more than once a day. And it happened for 13 years because he didn't stop. I stole a knife from the kitchen and I put it under my pillow. And that's when he stopped coming into my room. That's also when he kicked me out for the first time. But I think what it is they broke down each individual act and then how many times they could prove it happened, and then they put it all together. And then there was not just me, but also what he did to my sister.
Tell me about the knife, because I've not heard this story. So
it was a small knife. It was like a little steak knife, but I slept with it on my pillow and he came in one night. I told him he needed to leave. And he would always, if I ever was successful with turning him away, he would always be like, I know where I'm not wanted. And then the next few days would be literal hell. Every waking moment, I was scared something was going to come flying at my head, or he was going to be yelling at me. And he was yelling at me constantly until he got what he wanted.
He felt entitled.
He did. 100%. He felt entitled. And the thing is when I got older and I started dating, he wouldn't touch me if I was dating someone. And I figured that out. And the detective asked me why. And I realized in his fucked up, warped brain, I think he viewed it like he was in a relationship with me. And I think he viewed me like I was like cheating with these guys. So he would treat me like shit, but he wouldn't touch me. So I would deal with the yelling and that abuse and everything else, but he wouldn't come into my room at night. So I would go from guy to guy to guy to guy. And the downfall of that safety net that I got from dating was I had no idea how to say no to a man. No idea. It took me years to learn how to say no. And I ended up pregnant at 18. I had my son when I was 19 because I went from guy to guy to guy and I didn't know how to say no to him. So I was a bit promiscuous, and I'm not proud of that, but it's just part of, growing up the way I was brought up. I truly believed I wasn't worth more than what was between my legs because that's what I was taught. I believed I didn't deserve anything unless I put out because that's what I was taught. And it took a long time for me to rewire my brain and get to a point where I could have a healthy relationship where I knew what my self-worth was and I knew what I deserved out of a relationship. And I knew that I had the right to say no and set boundaries. So it's not just like the abuse stopped when I left, because there were years of it playing like on a loop. The moment I woke up, the moment I went to sleep, I had nightmares, I had flashbacks. I've been diagnosed with PTSD from it. And it gets bad sometimes, especially around the holidays, especially around Christmas. I wonder why the fuck that is. Oh wait, I know. But it's something, it was a process having to deal with it, and it still affects me. It's not just, oh, I don't see him anymore, I'm all better. It has lasting effects. Like it started when I was so young. It helped shape the person that I grew into. And it's not all good. Like I have a hairpin trigger. I get angry easily when I'm stressed out. And I hate that. Sometimes I do yell at my kids when I'm angry and stressed out. I try not to ever stand over them. I've never stood over my kids and yelled at them, but I do yell at them sometimes. And I hate that. And I always apologize afterwards because I know I was in the wrong by yelling.
Oh, me too.
But it's something that, growing up, kid does wrong, the parent yells. That's, and when I was 18 and I found out I was pregnant the day after my 19th birthday. So it was scary. I didn't have my son's father didn't stick around. So I was a single mom. I was living in a new city. I had my dad, and that was my entire support system. And I didn't really know him. And the only example of parenting I had was my mom and Pete. And those are like billboard what not to do. So that's essentially how I developed my parenting was I took everything that I went through and I was like, just do the opposite because, I have things I can't change, or that I need to work on. And like, I'm terrified of the dark. I don't think that's ever going to change. I'm terrified of heights now because he's an asshole. I told that story already. But, and then there's things that I can change and I'm still working on, and I'm 31 now. So this has been what is that? 14 years since technically the abuse stopped. And I'm still working on fixing the effects of it. To this day, I am. I don't want to be the person who yells when they get stressed out. I don't want to be angry. I still have depression. I still have nightmares. They're not nearly as bad as they used to be, but I still have them. And I still have depression. I have anxiety. I cannot sit in a restaurant that has a seating where people are walking behind me because I can't have somebody standing behind me. Still, to this day, I can't have it because of him. It's not just, the physical act of the abuse. It's everything that happens afterwards. It's how it shapes that person because it changes you when you're abused. It's even if it's just one instance of abuse, it changes you because it's traumatic, and trauma shapes people different ways, but it's not something that you just get over. And that's something, if you have been abused and you have somebody to tell you just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and get over it. I heard that a lot. Tell them to go fuck a cactus. They have no idea what you're going through and they have no right to judge. And then you take care of yourself.
It is also the worst advice.
It really is. Honestly, I'm going to tell you what that advice did to me. When I was going to press charges, my dad was dating a woman named Diane, and she had been abused by her father, and she was older. So she came from a time where you didn't press charges. You didn't talk about it. You didn't deal with it. You just ignored it and pretended it didn't happen and tried to survive the best you could. And that's sad. And I'm sad that she had to deal with it that way. But she thought that since she dealt with it that way, I had to deal with it that way. And she made me second guess myself pressing charges so bad that I literally cut myself for the first time in years. I was so upset about it. And that was a moment, that was a wake up moment for me, because I was like, I can either ignore her and deal with this, or it's like I was at a crossroads. I could choose to deal with it in a healthy way, face the situation, press charges, and get the help I needed to figure out my shit. Or I could try to pick myself up by my bootstraps and just get over it and bottle it up and keep it inside me, where I would end up cutting myself to get a release, because that's what cutting is. It's not, we're trying to kill ourselves. It's a coping mechanism. When you're in physical pain, your brain releases hormones to ease the pain, and those hormones work on emotional pain as well. That's why people cut themselves. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but it is. And so I would end up cutting myself, and one day that wouldn't be enough. I wouldn't be able to cope with it, and I would end up killing myself, because I tried to kill myself when I was a teenager, when I thought there was no way out. I tried 3 times and I was unsuccessful. Thankfully, now I can say thankfully, but back then I literally was like, I can't even die right. That was I was so worthless. I couldn't even kill myself. And it was a very, very hard time. So I do not recommend just getting over it and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Talk about it with someone you trust in a place where you feel safe, and get it out in the open. Don't carry it all inside yourself. It's not worth it. It will destroy you.
It's a monumental task to talk about it with anybody. I think that idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, that bullshit, I think what that does is, more than anything, I think the thinking seems like if you don't tell anybody, then it didn't happen, and you can ignore it and pretend that it never happened, and you can be the person that you want to be. But nothing gets fixed that way.
No.
There is no justice, and there is no healing when you do that. And the two greatest things that came out of this was, one, that my father went to jail where he should be. 20 years is not enough. Like, it makes me so happy, like, that he will be old and his life will be over when he gets out. But the other thing too,
if he gets out, I'm hoping he just dies in there.
God, I know, me too. I have honestly been like secretly like waiting, like either he's going to get like stabbed, or he's going to have a heart attack, or he'll just die in there. Like,
well, he's going to be with sexual offenders, and he's not going to be in Gen Pop, so he probably won't get stabbed because he's with like-minded people. But
fuck.
I still hope he's having just a shittiest time ever.
I'll tell you about some of his letters here in a minute. But the other good thing that happened in that came of this is that you are on this, and just forgive me for a second because I'm going to be corny. You're on like this healing journey, and it is a difficult process. And if one were to pick themselves up by their bootstraps to get over it, it would actually look like fucking talking about it, like doing all the hard work to actually like.
Yeah, it's not like I'm choosing the easy path.
Exactly.
Neither path is easy. This is just the healthier one.
Yeah, and that's really reflected, I think, in just the way that I see you parent and the person that you've become, knowing everything that you've been through, knowing like the life that you had, how you became an adult, like the person you, like all of that leading up to now. Dude, you are killing it, man.
I'm trying. Honestly, I feel like I've been stuck for a few years. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, and I felt like I was stuck. So I just started cosmetology school, and I'm feeling so much better now. Although it's hard because I'm in class with like a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds, and I'm not hip to the lingo they use. I'm not cool anymore. I'm the mom of the group. Like, I make cupcakes for one of the girls' birthdays, and now I have to make them for everybody's birthdays. It's weird.
Oh my God. Anna, when she worked with me on campus, she worked in a lab, and they would get like lab assistants or lab techs, and they would be undergrads. And one of her like lab techs that she worked with, her mom was like my age or Anna's age, because she had her when she was young. So her mom was like 36, and she was like, "Oh, my mom is 36," and Anna was like, "What the fuck?" Like,
oh, that's funny. I saw the 27-year-old in our class feel old for the first time because one of the girls was talking about something that happened when she was young. And she was like, "Oh, I remember that happened." And then she was like, "Wait a minute, the girl I used to nanny was this age." And then she's like, "Oh my God, she's like 17 now." And like her face, it was like that 1,000-yard stare you get with the first time. And I was like, "You just realized you're old for the first time, didn't you?" And she was like, "What is this feeling?" And I'm like, "Ha, I feel it every day."
there were some questions in there that I was going to ask you, but I think I didn't put a pin in them, so I've forgotten them. I felt this like morbid curiosity to go back because I'm really curious. Like when you pulled a knife on Pete, I'm really curious what his response was, because that I think would be the first time that anybody probably actually threatened his life in a serious way.
You know that look he would get, like the "you'll pay for this later" look?
Oh yeah.
Where his eyes are kind of squinted. Like if you look up his mugshot, it's that look. Yeah, he looked at me like that, and then he just kind of walked away. But I don't think he took me I think he took me seriously, but he wasn't very scared of me. I was clearly like shaking. Like I probably couldn't have stabbed him if I tried. But I think he got the message, is what I was hoping he was the outcome. And he didn't try to come in anymore, because I think he finally realized I was not no means no. Sometimes you got to bring pointy, sharp objects into the conversation to make that point. But hey,
I'm a big proponent of keeping sharp, pointy objects just around in general, in case you need to use them.
Right.
All right. Let me tell you about how I think he has been handling prison. So when he was first arrested, I actually have okay. All right. So I'll tell you something bad first. So growing up, the way that I did is completely different from how you grew up with him. Um, One of the things that really impacted me was like self-esteem and confidence, because like you said, his like power move, he's 6 feet tall, and he would just tower over you, and he had a very loud voice, and he would just talk over you. And there was like he kind of got off on like humiliating or like being domineering. And so I always felt like when I was growing up with him, like I do this still like today, like when I start, if people are talking and I'm like part of the conversation and I start to talk, I never just start talking with like my full voice. It always starts small. And if
Me.
yeah, and if they don't if they don't hear me, if people don't hear me and they're still talking, I just ball it back up. I didn't have anything to say. I don't got anything. And it's taken me, it's so funny because in my like professional career, I go from 0 to 100. Like if I have something to say, I just like this, I am a professional. These are my words. But in like my personal life, I like Anna's a talker, and she'll talk over me. I'll be like, it's fine. I don't care. Like I didn't really want to talk. She's talking for me. That's great. But one of the things, really standing up for myself has been a problem. Like I'm almost 40, and it makes you're afraid of confrontation, and you feel like you don't have a voice. And growing up, like I always had these dreams where like I'm trying to talk, but you can't. Like you feel, it's like when you're crying and there's like that big lump in your throat. Like that's always what it felt like in my dreams. And
You limit yourself.
yeah. And I remember so many times I would wake up like from a dream, like where I was trying to talk or yell in a dream, and I would just like gasp because I had been like holding my breath like in my sleep. And this a couple years ago, so I've been in therapy now. Well, I've been in therapy for several years for major depressive disorder. I had my own shit going on sort of around the same time that you started pressing charges with him. My life was in a different place, and my life went downhill way far. And so I've been on my own different road, and coming back to dealing with Pete has been a totally different track for me. But there was a dream I had. I remember he was in the dream, and he's talking, and in dreams, like there are no words in the dream. It's just like gibberish in the dream. And I remember like it's so weird. It was a breakthrough in a dream. I literally yelled at him to shut the fuck up, and I woke myself up because I yelled "fuck you." Like I woke up yelling "fuck you," and from that moment on, I have not had those dreams where I can't talk anymore. Like
that's good.
It solved itself in a dream, but it was like 35 years in the making. Like, and I feel more confident like talking with people. I still am not like a big social person. Like I still get uncomfortable and all that, but I at least have the confidence of my convictions, right? Like if I have something to say, I'm going to say it, and I'm, whatever. And that seems small, but like for someone who like has so much to say, and like I have a personality that is hidden behind like resting bitch face and like a sarcastic voice and stuff, like for someone who actually really wants to talk, like that was huge, like to actually have like just the most tiny bit of self-confidence. So all of that to say,
I'm curious, do you think that maybe that's why you're a writer?
oh, for sure. Because that I've told, yeah, because that's the easiest way for me to communicate. I've always really liked stand-up comedy, and I don't know if you knew this about me, but I've tried like open mics, like stand-up open mic nights before, and I used to keep like I used to keep like a really long like log of like jokes that I would write, and I would put together like set lists and do open mics. And I've had a couple really good open mics, and that was like before Willow was born, and I haven't gone back and done it. But it's like I get, to me, just writing out my thoughts is satisfying, and I'm not going to be a stand-up comedian, but it was always really important for me to like actually get up there and do something that I always wanted to do. And like, to me, that's a huge success because, you know, I don't think that is a confidence booster. Even when you bomb, it's a confidence booster because you're like, I got up in front of a bunch of people and really sucked, and that was okay.
Yeah, they're not getting up there.
No, exactly.
Who cares what they think?
So now, all right. So now I'm going to share with you the situation about the letters. So when Pete was arrested, he the shit got weird. There's a part of him that we have not discussed, and that is his whole quote unquote writing career. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, they're horrible. He started self-publishing.
You know, I had to be his proofreader and editor, right? You know how fucking weird that shit is?
So it was weird enough reading that shit like as his son, and like it's not good for one, but also it's like creepy. And then when you told me that, and after all that, I was like, that's like a whole new level of like sadistic. Like he is like making her read this stuff that is like vaguely about that. Like it is so weird. So they're bad. They're terrible books, and I'm not even going to say the name of them. I will say this: he glamorizes his life as a paramedic. Which
he does that when he's not writing too.
Yeah. We could go into a lot of, okay, sorry.
That'll be part 4.
Yeah. So he starts sending letters from prison, and I shit you not, I read the first one, and sort of out of morbid curiosity, and it starts off, please share my story with others so that they will lead honest lives so they won't wind up in prison, because prison is not
publish it, memoirs of a pedophile.
Yeah, because prison is not a glamorous place. I didn't keep any of these, that's a long story, but basically he says there is no one to clean up after you here in prison. You have to clean up after yourself, which like no shit, like that's part of being an adult. But then he also mentions that the language is inappropriate. Can you imagine?
No, a place full of criminals isn't holier than thou.
Okay, so we grew up watching R-rated movies with him. You would think this guy would know, like, yeah, no, prison's not a good place. Prison, you got to kind of watch your fucking back in prison. And also people talk like real people in prison. So that was how it started. And then he started sending me very thick envelopes, and they were stuffed with chapters from his new book that he expected me to type out and compile and publish for him. And I just let him keep sending them. And I read one page to get an idea of what he was doing. And I will tell you exactly what he was doing. I feel like he was trying to make a case for himself. Because the characters that he had in his previous books, you know, they were children, and he was writing about them like sexually. It was weird. But all of a sudden, in this new book, this new, new book, new world, these characters are growing up, and we see them in college. So all of a sudden they're adults. So it's okay that we're ogling at their bodies because now they're adults. They're fully formed women. And he's like going into detail about it. And I get to that point and I'm like, well, I don't think you're already convicted to 20 years. You're not going to convince anybody that you had this master plan of like writing about children turning into adults. And the entire time you were just fascinated by how beautiful, like this is really creepy and gross.
No. Does he not understand it's still fucking gross?
So he kept sending them, and every time I would get it, I would just stuff it in a drawer. Okay, like because I worked at home at that time, and I had a top right drawer. I bring the mail in, letter from him. I would put it in the drawer, and I would close it. And Anna was like, "What are you doing with those?" And I was like, "I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna burn them someday." And that day came because I got another letter in the mail, and I like tried to open the drawer, and the drawer was stuck. Like it was stuffed full of these fucking envelopes. And I was like, well, I guess it's time to get rid of them. And so I just took a big old pile of them, put them in the fireplace, and just burned all the fuckers. And it felt really good that no one will ever read that bullshit. Like no one will ever, like I don't know how he got the jail currency to get all the paper and the pens and stuff. Oh, but it made me so happy to burn it all. Like that he just wasted all of his fucking commissary.
You know, you say you don't know how, but it makes me all warm and fuzzy inside to remember, to like imagine like a big guy named Juicy doing everything to him that he ever did to us. Maybe he's somebody's bitch and they gave it to him.
Fucking Pete.
In every way.
Pete and Juicy. Getting railed over a stainless steel toilet for a couple of stamps. That's what he deserves.
Isn't it?
This was part 2 of No Father is Better Than One. We have one more episode left. Jessi and I discuss the aftermath of pressing charges and what closure means. I want to thank Jessi again for spending 3 hours and even a follow-up call helping me put together these episodes and for sharing her story.